Hey, everybody, welcome back. I am Emily Moyer. Michael Wann is here with me. We have a guest observing here in the room with us as well. And I still have my background from Conspiracy Cocktail up. We decided to leave it because it probably does play into some of the things we're going to talk about today. This is episode number 27 of Playing the Glass Bead Game. Michael, good morning. How are you? There's Natasha.
There's Natasha. I am doing well. So I'm going to be quite honest. We've been doing the show how many times? How many episodes like total have we done? We've talked about this before. Let's say 35.
So this is the 27th episode of Playing the Glass Bead Game. I think we've done, let me see how, I think we've done.
Well, just a number. So I'll just say let's say 45 then.
Okay.
So out of 44 times, I have been able to see the background, but now we've got this fake Twin Peaks background with people popping in and out. And so I'm a little bit suspect. Like, for all I know, you were under duress. And so I don't know if this was like invented for Cappy or if this is a thing, but you're supposed to blink if you're under duress.
Okay.
Is that right? So right now, so this is your opportunity. Like, are you under duress?
I am not under duress. At least
you're supposed to blink. It doesn't matter what you say because you're going to say whatever the people would. Okay, good. All right. Now I feel a little bit safe because I didn't know it was in the background. I did not know. And so now I feel better.
Other than the general duress that we are all under because we cannot believe the shit show in front of our eyes. Other than that, I'm good. But you're right to wonder if I were in Twin Peaks, if I were in the television series or in the reality of Twin Peaks, if I found myself in this room with the red velvet curtain and the psychedelic sort of semi-Masonic floor here, it really is what the Masonic floor is made of, then I would be either in some form of duress or in post-duress. So your suspicion that I might be was valid. Have you ever did you ever watch Twin Peaks?
I know what it is. I may have watched 10 minutes once of one episode, but other than that, no, I'm not particularly familiar with the subtleties of that program.
Okay, so it has come up over and over and over again in some of the shows that you and I have done, just in terms of correlations. And one of the Ann Robinson, who's in the Project Kids group and whatever. One day when we were in the group, we were talking and she was like, Emily, you have to watch because the Twin Peaks was on back in 1990 for 2 seasons. And then it was off the air for a number of years. And in 2017, there was one more season. Right. And she said, you have to watch the updated season because in the updated season, they travel through the walls using the electric outlets. Right. So I was like, oh, okay. So I thought I went there thinking I was going to learn a technique for time travel or something like that. So I decided to rewatch the whole series back, from the beginning back in 1990 until the new one, because I was 14 or 15 when I watched it the first time. And I don't think that a 14 or 15-year-old can really grok all that was being offered. So I went and watched it. And what I realized about the first 2 seasons was that I guess I hadn't finished watching the second season. I guess I stopped somewhere about halfway through originally. And which is interesting because David Lynch actually stopped working on the show partway through the second season because he didn't like the way the network was making him take it. So it was I must have stopped about the same time, not knowing that, right? So that's kind of interesting. But when I watched the rest of it this time, there was definitely some dawdling around in the second season, but by the end, it was left in an interesting place that almost make that the plan had been all along to come back many, many, many years later. And I think the return had something to do with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that would be coming up in 2020, because that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction plays into some things from Twin Peaks from the earlier part.
How did it play into the walk me through that?
It's related to how the doors or the portals open.
Okay,
because so there's some cave paintings that are found in Twin Peaks at the sort of access point of what they call the lodge, and there's a white lodge and there's a black lodge. and it's a map, and it seems to like show a certain area. And if you go to that certain area, like at a certain time period, during a certain time period, and say in a certain state of mind, and there's certain conditions met at said area, you will start to see the shimmering red velvet curtain, and there you can enter the lodge. Right?
All right.
The lodge, right? So, anywho, that watching the rest of the series, the second season was interesting. And then we went into, then when we moved, fast forwarded to 2017 and watched the third season, it was vastly different than the first two seasons had been, and fascinating. And I actually think I would really love for you to go watch the entire series, Michael, because I think there may be the most information to work with in terms of like some of the things you and I are trying to achieve, given in this series. And I think people completely, I think it flew right over most people's head. But it has to do basically with, using electricity as a tool for moving between realities, right? And it was very fascinating. And there were a lot of questions that I have about reality that were answered through this series. And I think that there was also a lot of things left unanswered that I think, might be interesting for us to achieve answers to on our own. But, and the way that watching it right now synced up with all of the things that are going on in my own personal life. Like I knew that it was like divine timing that I watched it for some reason. Like, the updated series was on in 2017, but I didn't choose to watch it till now. Right. And even things from that old part of the series from back in 1990 really seem to correlate with now. And in fact, it's interesting. I've been having a lot of conversations with people recently about how we seem to be like traveling back to the 90s. Like if you look at like the clothing fashions and like just sort of what's going on culturally and stuff like that, aside from like the obvious main dominant narrative tyranny that was going on, there's a lot of stuff that correlates between right now and the 90s, which is of course when the series first premiered. And so it's just really interesting. I think it would be really cool actually if you watched it, because then we could really talk about some of the methods and techniques and characters that are displayed as part of this. I think it could be sort of a fascinating endeavor. So here's the nudge for you to watch Twin Peaks. Huh?
So I'm looking. Well, it's certainly you captured my attention with the Saturn Jupiter conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
Because that bleeds over. That was 1990. You said it was from that part, the original release of the series. And so that is very much grounded in this time right now. So you got me kind of hooked with that. And I just was doing a quick search on who the antagonist is. So I just finished watching a series of a TV series, which, I don't like how it sucks me in when I get sucked into a TV show. Like, it's like, I can be as addicted to that as anyone else. And I weigh those within my own value system. Like, do I really want to commit to like all of this time and energy watching this thing, which it's like, yeah, I'm going to ascertain some information, but at the same time, I'm going to be mixing it up with, I don't like watching that much TV. So that being said, I think that the two are linked because like, that kind of popped up. The only reason I watched the whole show, which I watched, is because what show was it?
Yeah.
Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, that's a great show.
I've never seen like Twin Peaks. I'm familiar with it as a cultural touch point, but like I've never watched it. And so I watched I think there are 5 series. It was a ridiculous amount. I would have probably stopped watching it much earlier on, but it was recommended like wait till the end and it like gets to be a good show. And I'm not really certain exactly what my takeaway is from Breaking Bad, but this is where it kind of gets interesting, and it parallels what you're saying with Twin Peaks without knowing really anything else about Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks spilled over into reality just immediately for me with a Saturn Jupiter conjunction, because I've been following Saturn and Jupiter, just watching it with my own eyes in the heavens more over the past probably year since the conjunction. Like that really pulled me into watching the ecliptic and watching the planets as they are, as opposed to a concept. So I mentioned this to you before we began recording, that I did a tour of one of the sites on the 40th parallel of the Susquehanna River, and I meet this guy. And I'd done a session with him a while ago. And so I knew him a little bit from that, but I got to meet him face to face, and he drove over from New Jersey. And I literally just finished watching the entire Breaking Bad series. And if you're familiar with it, you know that it takes place in Albuquerque. So, we'd got another hit with Albuquerque because I just heard it mentioned from Natasha. But here's where it gets interesting. So this guy who comes over, he shares with me that he runs a family business. And what their family business is, I believe it was probably started by his father. Now he's the guy who runs it. And they make scientific lab equipment. Mm-hmm. Their customer base, I'm assuming, ranges from any place that has a lab. So maybe schools, but also big pharmaceutical companies and so forth. But they have a particular focus upon glassware, like beakers and all that sort of stuff that I kind of know about from when I was in chemistry class in high school, but I learned about it much more so watching the whole Breaking Bad. And I'm watching Breaking Bad with this, chemistry, alchemy, all this sort of stuff. And so here comes this guy who literally runs a business where that's what they manufacture. So I'm like, all right, that's kind of interesting. And because, it's bleeding over, and I'm talking to him along during our tour, and I'm like, well, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And basically his entire life has been lived within probably the same, I don't know, let's say 100-mile area, where he lives now. And I'm like, okay, so you've lived your entire life there. He's like, well, actually, for 2 years in my 20s, I moved out to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm like, you own a glassware company, and I'm thinking all about chemistry and glassware, and you've got this connection to Albuquerque after all of this sort of stuff. And so there's this I can't really see where it's going, but I can see the form with it. So I'm going to suggest to myself, what you're saying with Twin Peaks is tying into it, because there is this Jupiter Saturn thing, which is really bleeding in. And the fact that you're pushing me or giving me this nudge. So I don't know if I can go back to watching anything immediately, because I really have to detox everything I put in my mind just being in front of a TV set. But I think I may have to go and watch it. So long story, I'm going to watch it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting and important. And it came back in 2017 when we had the Great American Eclipse, which was the beginning of the sort of long season that led up to the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction last year, right? Where we had all sorts of strange activities and things that appeared to be sacrifices and stuff like that also matches up to things that happened in Twin Peaks. And we did Conspiracy Cocktail on Twin Peaks this past weekend, and it was kind of a little bit chaotic. Things were a little different because we experimented with it live at Robert's event, and it wasn't exactly smooth, but in the end there were some interesting things that sort of came out of it. But it is the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, right, could be it's when two things that are distinctly different sort of come conjunct. They sort of cross and almost blend for a second, right? They pass, that kind of thing. And that is sort of what you're looking at in Twin Peaks with this idea of a black lodge and a white lodge, and being able to, it's the great benefic and the great malefic. Right. You know what I mean? The darkness.
I couldn't hear what Laura said.
The great benefic and the great malefic, right? And then this sort of this sort of blurring of them and trying to sort of suss out who's who and what's what and whatnot. It's excellent. And I was very surprised at some of the things that were shown. I'm going to get to Breaking Bad in a second, because I'm glad that you brought that up. But, when you watch the whole series, but particularly when you get to season 3, and then you think about some of the things that you and I have spoken about over the course of the last year, particularly when it comes to these buildings with massive amounts of graffiti near electric plants and hydroelectric power plants, and how we feel like there's a lot of energy and the people coming through these are time travelers. You're like, holy fuck, right? We've been, what are you doing? We've been pretty close. The narrative, some of the narrative that we've been laying out here really matches a lot of this. And in fact, there were so many places shown in this series that looked like Chatsworth to me. When I went to look where all the stuff was filmed, it wasn't actually filmed in Chatsworth, but it was filmed in locations all around Chatsworth, including Simi Valley, which is just like literally the other side of the mountain if you go over the other side, right? And there was enough stuff in there that it was like, I even actually think that in some ways the story was inspired by, I had totally forgotten about this, two girls who went missing, one of whom was killed and found in very similar condition as in the case in Twin Peaks in Chatsworth in 1987, right? I read some of the article that I was still able to find from when that girl had died, and like some of the description really matched to the way things went down early on in the series in Twin Peaks, right? And it was almost like that's the sacrifice that begins opening up the door, the ritual, right? So it was pretty interesting, but I would love for you to watch it, and then we could revisit some of this, both in terms of, wow, we've been pretty accurate about how some of this is working, and then B, with the upgrading of the electrification of our reality and our atmosphere that obviously is creating all sorts of issues and problems. I think there is also the potentiality for learning how it works and being able to use it for things that you and I have decided we might like to experience, right? And really seeing how that works, right? And how one needs to sort of position themselves in relationship to this reality to be able to it's like there's a holistic way of doing things, and then there's a way of doing things that sort of steals from the reality. You know what I mean? And it's just, it's really good. So I suggest you watch it. But one thing I never expected to hear you bring up was Breaking Bad, right? First, that did not strike me as a series that you would watch.
Right, exactly. Like it wasn't. It was. Let me just make this one connected, and then I want you to go into Breaking Bad, because I'm curious what your take of it is. So I was watching Breaking Bad very much like with the normal lens, which I look at, which is like, going deeper in what all of this stuff represents, and like, and particularly like a feedback mechanism to me in my own personal life. That's how I see any of these. Anytime I'm going to go and watch something like that. So now we've got this link from just this conversation between Breaking Bad and Twin Peaks. And as you were talking, as I was reading about Twin Peaks and realizing, like, the main good guy in Twin Peaks is an agent, right? It's the Kyle MacLachlan character. And within Breaking Bad, you've got an agent, the Hank character. And then I'm like, well, who's the bad guy? Who's the bad guy in Twin Peaks? So I type in antagonist in Twin Peaks, and I see that there's this guy, Bob. Mm-hmm. So now we've got the double B, right? Yeah. And so Breaking Bad, I would, the code for me talking about Breaking Bad, I'd refer to it as baking bread.
Okay.
You like it. Bread. Like if baking bread means you want to watch Breaking Bad.
Yeah, got it.
Bread. So it's all. So we got this BB thing, and then we got the dub with like the Walter White, and we're dealing with. I'm not certain though on the details yet of Twin Peaks, so I can't do a better comparison, but I can already sense and feel that whereas Breaking Bad is really, really grounded in mundane reality, and it sounds like Twin Peaks is very much like, a little bit more mystical and like embracing the unknown. Like, to look at both of those, like watching Breaking Bad in terms of like it being a mystical tale, and then watching Twin Peaks in terms of being like a mundane tale or like a more material, like there's going to be something there. So that's where I am with that right now. Now, what's your connection with Breaking Bad?
Well, I watched it when it originally was on, right? Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing is that I've done the blue meth. Hey everybody, you just watched the opening clip of episode number 27 of Playing the Glass Speed Game with myself and Michael Wann. This was kind of a cool episode. We both sort of reviewed how the respective television shows each of us have been watching sort of synchronistically linked up with our current activities. And we talked about the shows Twin Peaks and Breaking Bad, which we will probably dig further into one or both of them in future episodes. But it was very interesting sort of how everything lined up for each of us sort of separately and then both collectively as well. We talked a bit about my road trip again from Los Angeles to Austin. We just did it again to bring a car back here. And we paid particular attention to something that happened in the first portion of that. We will pick up on that road trip probably next week on Project Kids as well, because there's more to it. But we ended up in an interesting conversation about electricity, electric lines, windmills, farms, time and dimensional travel, and exactly how rifts in the matrix or in the simulation are either made or controlled. It was a pretty interesting episode with a live anomaly that occurred during the episode. So anywho, I hope you enjoyed the opening clip. If you would like to receive the full episode and you haven't had a complimentary one yet, please hit me up and we'll make that happen. And if you would like a free day at the Project Kids Cafe and Social Club, we can do that too. All right, guys, have a great week. We'll see you next time. Project Kids next week. Bye-bye.